Um, okay, so comments are important, and try and get in the habit right from the off. And I'm going to challenge you today for all your coding exercises. Try and make sure that you're writing clear and consistent comments in whatever you write. Let's talk a little bit about conditional logic now. So we first introduced conditional logic in the Principles of Programming session, and we said that conditional logic is really useful in our computer programs because very rarely are they perfectly linear. We usually want our programs to do different things depending on whether something is true or not. And that's basically known as conditional logic. And we gave this example here to say they're a bit like decision trees, that we say if this is true, then do this, otherwise do this. And in Python, we can apply conditional logic using if, elif, else statements. Okay, so let's have an example of how this works. So let's take the simplest example first, where we just have a single check that we want to do, and we say if it's true, then do this. If it's not true, then do this. Okay, so that's the simplest example of, well, actually, technically, the simplest example of conditional logic is where you just say, if it's true, do this. You don't have to have an else bit, but usually you would. So let's imagine we want to check someone's age and determine whether they should go to room A or B. And we're basically going to check, is the patient under 60? If they are, then we'll send them to room A. Otherwise, we'll send them to room B. Okay. This is how we would write that in Python. So we use the if statement here. Then we write whatever our comparison statement needs to be. So what this says is if the value stored in the variable age is less than 60. And then we use a colon. So Python will then check that. It'll check the value of age and see if it is less than 60 or not. If it is, then it will run this block of code here. Now, this could be however many lines of code you want it to be. In this case, we've just got a very simple example. We've just got a single line of code that just prints, please go to room A. But in reality, you'd probably do something a bit more interesting than that. But just for demonstration purposes, we've got something very simple. Now, you'll note the tab indentation here. And we talked a bit about tab indentations last week. Tab indentations are incredibly important in Python. Okay, those of you who remember the Pep 8 song from a few weeks ago will recall that it's one of the first lyrics in the Pep 8 song is about the fact you don't need no curly braces, just four spaces. That's what Python's all about. Okay, so some programming languages you'd put a curly bracket here and then you'd close it again at the end of the statement. That's not how Python works. It works on indentations. Now, if you're using something like VS Code or any other decent IDE, when you write this bit here and you type and you hit enter, it'll automatically tab indent you to the correct place. Okay, but if it doesn't, or if you've lost that in some way, you sometimes need to manually tab indent. So you just push tab. That's one tab's worth. It's four spaces. Okay. And basically what this says is Python will only run anything that is indented here within this block of code if this condition is true. If it's not true, we then run what is in the else block. So we can say else, and so it'll only run this line of code here if that condition is not true. So if the patient age is less than 60, then this will get run and this won't. But if it's not less than 60, then this will get run and this won't. Okay, so that's a basic format for an if statement structure in Python. You have the word if, whatever condition you want to check, then the colon, and then a block of code saying what to do if that's true. Now, you don't have to have anything else. You might just want to do something if that's true, and if not, you just don't do anything. But if you do want to do something if it's not true, that's different, then you would say use an else statement here. And you do the similar down here. You put in your whatever code you want to run if it's not true. Note that if you put in an else, you can't leave this blank. So if you want it to do nothing, then you have to leave the else out. That also includes a comment is not interpretable code. So you can't, some people do this when they're new to coding. They'll say, I'll just write my if statement. I'll write the else bit in a minute. I'll just put a comment in here. It will fall over. You'll get an unexpected EOF while parsing if you try to do that. Basically, it means that the Python's got to the end of the file and it thought there should be something else because it was expecting to be told what to do if that wasn't true. And it's basically saying if you just left a comment there, Python reads that as if the age is less than 60, then do this, otherwise, and it just stops talking. So that's no good. So just be aware of that. Now you can also do multiple checks at the same time within an if statement. So it might be that we want to check the patient's age and we want 3 different scenarios. So it might be that if they're under 16, then we'll send them to children's. Otherwise, if they're between 16 and 59, then they'll go to room A. And if they're over 60, then they'll go to room B. And we can do that by using the elif statement. So we can enhance our if-else statement in Python by adding in an elif. So an else doesn't need a conditional statement because it just means if that isn't true, then do this. But an elif does. Elif stands for else if. So what this says is if the age is less than 16, then print please go to the children's room. If that's not true, then it'll go here and say, okay, well, if it's not true, if the age is less than 60, print please go to room A. Now, we don't need to check if they're also greater than 16 because we know that. If they were less than 16, this would never run because if they're less than 16, this block of code would have run and everything else would have been ignored. So we know if we've got to this point that the age is not less than 16, i.e. they are at least 16. So we can just say if they're less than 60, which emulates if they're 16 to 59, and in which case we go to room A. Here the else statement is basically saying if none of this is true, if you've got down here, none of that is true. So they are not less than 16, nor are they less than 60. So therefore they are at least 60. In fact, that should say 60 or over, not over 60. So that piece of code will only run if these 2 conditions are not true. And you can have as many elifs as you want. And else will only work if none of those elifs, none of the ifs or elifs are true. So keep talking about these comparison statements. We use these comparison operators to check what's called a relational statement. And a relational statement is basically any statement in Python that can be that will resolve to a Boolean value, one that is either true or false. Any statement that you put in an if statement has to be something that will either resolve to true or false. Okay, it's either true or it's not true. And these are the operators we use for this. So we talked earlier about how the equal sign does not mean is equals to in Python because it's the assignment operator. If we want to say is this value equal to this value, then instead we say equals equals. So we use 2 equal signs next to each other. That means is it equal to. So A equals B means value of A equal to value of B. So we can check whether that will either be true or false. Either A is equal to B or A is not equal to B. But you need to get in the habit of, if you're asking whether something is equal to, you need to use a double equal sign. The way I've always remembered it throughout all my life is to say is strictly equal to, and that those kind of 2 beats allow me to my brain to put in the 2 equal signs, but use whatever works for your brains. So we may want to check as well whether something is not equal to something. Okay, and to say not equal to, we use the exclamation mark followed by an equals. That says value of A is not equal to B. Okay. We can then say value of A is greater than B. Value of A is less than B. If we use the greater than sign next to the an equals, that says value of A is greater than or equal to. So if you want to find out if somebody is at least 60, you could say greater than or equal to 60. If you want to check whether that's true. And you can do the same less than. You can say less than or equal to as well. We can also use these extra statements here, and an or, if we want to check multiple things at the same time. So the and statement allows us to check 2 different things And if we put that in an if statement, that block of code will only run if both of those things are true. Or you could have three statements if all three of those statements are true. So this will only resolve to true if A is greater than B and A is also less than C. Okay, so both of those things must be true for this to resolve to a true Boolean value. You might have it though the other way around. You might want to say, I've got a couple things I want you to check. Only one of them needs to be true in order for this if statement to carry out this block of code. So you could say here, you could use the or statement. So this says if A is greater than B or A is less than C. If one of those is true, at least one of them, then that will resolve to true. Okay.